that's how it goes. All right, all those in favour of receiving the comprehensive reports from the Chief Executive and his Group Chief Financial Officer, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Thank you very much. We're going to the category, item 9, the Category 2P Property Remediation Scheme. This has been through the Political Advisory Group and sets up a scheme to arrange grants for properties assessed as 2P, which can be dealt with through property level remediation. I'll welcome Matt, Mace, Tanya. I did see her a while ago. We all know about this. This is a pretty good thing here. I think just before you get going too far about it, when you notice that $350,000 is actually within the overall budget that you had, it's not an additional $350,000. Is that right?
That's the intention, yeah.
Okay, that's good stuff. Okay, please pay attention. This is very important stuff that we're doing here.
Thanks, Your Worship. I feel I should apologise first. Mace and I did try to wear matching outfits like Peter and Gary, but we haven't quite pulled it off, so apologies for that. I was
a sale at Farmers last week, I can see.
I just wanted to briefly say, before asking Mace just to take you through a presentation on some of the highlights of the 2P scheme, just to emphasise what Phil said earlier, really, this is a significant milestone for the Recovery Office now, getting through, really this sees us having got through all of the policy work, the major policy work, and really being able to turn our minds to implementation. It really is all about implementation now. Mace.
Kia ora, Your Worship and members. Good to be with you today. Really, the purpose of today is to take you through the arrangements for Category 2P and the Property Risk Mitigation Scheme, noting the new service costs, as you mentioned, Your Worship. We're seeking your approval for key elements of the 2P Property Mitigation Scheme, as set out in sections 14 to 28 of the report. Just a bit of a reminder, I guess you, in last governing body meeting, you approved the overall policy, but and agreed to a grant scheme around property to support property owners to voluntarily implement feasible property level interventions that mitigate the intolerable risk to life. So I think it's important to just reflect these voluntary mechanisms and the overall scheme. Just briefly to reflect on feasibility and risk. So Category 1 are those areas where tolerable risk already exists. Category 2 and 3 have that same risk profile of intolerable, with Category 2P and C where interventions can be done either at a community level or, in this case, at a property scale intervention can become tolerable and people can remain in their homes safely once those interventions are in place. Category 3, of course, is intolerable risk. For Category 2P interventions, the high-level policy settings you made were estimated to cost to be limited to 25% or less of the capital value of the property, as at 26th of January 2023, and could be reasonably expected to be able to be delivered within 2 years of the categorisation decision. So those are the overview. The intent of the scheme is to support homeowners to reduce their risk to life to a tolerable level, as I mentioned, and support whānau and communities to stay in the places they love and where it is possible to do so safely, offering a cost-effective response to storm risk, future storm risk, and avoid the cost of future land ownership and deconstruction, but particularly that focus on maintaining communities and people in their homes. The proposed grant scheme will support homeowners with their risk mitigation. The grant's fixed sum tied to the agreed scope of works for any property level intervention. The total grant value up to 25%, as I mentioned, set by the governing body. And the homeowner is responsible for the implementation, any cost overruns following feasibility. So just to come to that, 2 stages exist. So there's a number of gateways in this process where homeowners, property owners, residents participate, where we're testing the feasibility and the practicality, affordability of implementing these property level interventions. The 2 stages really are from a design and consenting grant to confirm the feasibility, and that will really test the ability and affordability within the parameters that have been set. And then a construction grant to complete the implementation of a property level intervention. Importantly, if it's not feasible after the scoping phases or feedback from property owners around practicality, the scheme moves to Category 3. Really not Your Worship, not members not taking you through this, but just to indicate we do have a process map and really have thought out some of those options that will be continually improved as we get feedback from the community. But and to mention, there are gateways here that really test the effectiveness and feasibility of this scheme. Really just taking you to scenarios. Properties with an effective mitigation that will cost more than 25% may be eligible at the discretion of the council. So where it's, sometimes these are finely balanced, either in terms of the risk or the ability and affordability. So some will be able to be practically implemented where the costs are slightly over and the landowner is willing to meet those additional costs to stay in their home. Where the homeowner is not able to manage the works, and the total cost will include a project manager, or perhaps special circumstances will apply that you've already approved. And if a feasible intervention across boundaries will be considered for Cat 3 unless written permissions from neighbours are required. So this is about collaboration and agreement. And if work's not completed, the notice remains on the property file so that future owners are aware of the works and the risks. Really just around what the expected costs are, to remind you, $20 to $30 million for Category 2P, or those property level intervention grants, which is within the current commitment of the co-funded storm recovery funding package, and as mentioned, $350,000 to implement the scheme. In terms of Crown co-funding, Category 2P is allocated in the risk mitigation funding in the Crown agreement, subject to business cases to the National Resilience Fund. We have been in active discussions with the Cyclone Recovery Unit to amend the agreement to allow use of Category 3 funds, and that this scheme offsets using Category 3. And also, most importantly, to have more timely resolution for property owners and residents where there's an intolerable risk to life from future storm events. So it is about speed and effectiveness. So just in terms of the next steps, subject to your approval, we've finalised the scheme terms and associated documentation, seeking delegation to the Chief Executive to approve those final terms, any minor amendments to the ones attached to the report, finalising the grant program, and we have got that ready to be implemented. Confirm the co-funding with the Crown, and we have a meeting tomorrow to talk about that, and confirm the resourcing and communicate and implement the process. So we are taking a rapid pathway here to give people certainty for their living conditions so they can live safely and continue in their communities. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks. Well, I think this is our opportunity to grant approval, but you still have to get the co-funding approval from the Crown. The indications are that it's coming, is that right?
Just to clarify, Your Worship, there is funding there already. We're just suggesting using a different bucket within that funding agreement so that we can do this more quickly.
Righto. Councillor Darby's got a first question, and there's Dalton Henderson Ferry Turner, so as fully.
Quick question. For the 2Ps we're looking at, CVs only. So there's no opportunity for independent valuation, is that just for the sake of efficiency, considering we're in a totally different area than the Cat 3s, where we made available independent valuations as well. So is that to really sort of simplify the process, taking into account that the CV is not necessarily a market tool to establish value?
Thank you, Councillor Darby. Yes, it's a pragmatic approach, and to avoid future costs of getting individual valuations for the 100 to 110 properties that we believe may be in the position for a property level intervention.
Yeah, so look, I can understand the pragmatic approach here, considering the values and the numbers we're dealing with, and I'm just sort of thinking I can't see another way to do it really, and be nimble and do it fast. You've explored the other ways, and I guess this is the fastest and most efficient way of doing it that you've explored.
Yeah, you're precisely right. It's about speed primarily, but remember there's a dispute process as well. So where somebody, is painfully unhappy with the CV that's being used, the dispute process can kick in, and we can talk about an RV if necessary.
Okay, I'm good with that. Thank you.
I think I was next. Could you just go back to the table that you had on the process, please? I just have a question. Just looking at the terms, scoping the works and the opt-in, and it has in there a 3-month time limit on it. If I'm just trying to understand the homeowner, under categorisation, the homeowner seeks professional advice. Where does the 3 months kick off?
The 3 months generally kicks off from the time of the initial final categorisation advice, and then there's a number of other gateways where the homeowner can opt in or out. The categorisation may change, Councillor. Yeah.
If they're unable to get the professional advice they need, be it shortage of skill, geotech as an example, is there flexibility around that 3 months?
Always. This is so there are special circumstances that we can take into account. So the focus is on people and being able to safely live in their home and give them support.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson, please.
Sorry, I've got a number of questions, but I'll try and keep them as tight as possible. It's a long day. So can I clarify, because I just sort of missed it a little bit, the 2P money, is that proposed to be coming from our Cat 3 pot or our Making Space for Water pot, or which pot's it coming from?
The proposal has come from the Category 3 pot, so we can deliver that more quickly, and if these weren't 2P, they would be Category 3, so the calculation doesn't change.
Sure. Because it would have been money going to that resident as a Cat 3 anyway, right? Yeah, okay.
The Category 2 pot involves business cases, so what we're trying to do is remove the need to produce business cases and free up this money more quickly by using the Category 3 pot, which doesn't involve producing business cases and sending them to Treasury, etc. Thank
you, I appreciate that. So, yeah, with the 2P kind of process, and this flowchart is extremely helpful, thank you. People getting their own geotech, their own consents, all those kind of self-directed kind of things. We've had some real problems trying to find experts to do a bunch of work in these areas. What happens if people can't find people to do the work?
We will take a pragmatic approach, but we have been doing some broader work in terms of what the market is for professional advice, and there does appear to be sufficient market capability to do this level of work. It's not an enormous amount of work in the scheme of what's being delivered across the storm recovery or the normal program of infrastructure projects across Auckland.
Thank you. Can I get some clarity, and I have asked previously whether we can get a list of suburbs or areas that are facing categorisation, because I'm getting people commenting me, justifiably really angry and upset that they're waiting. So is there further information I can give to communities to say, hey, look, you're next, or you're early next year, or, any information would be great. Could we get a list, or does that exist?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Henderson. We realise that people have been waiting for some time, and whilst we've been delivering it quite reasonably quickly and learned from other disaster events, one, we'd like to do it today, but our pipeline of work currently goes through to March in terms of categorisation, because we're doing a property by property based risk assessment, but we can provide you that, and we're going to communicate more generally to Aucklanders, and particularly those Aucklanders affected by these severe weather events.
Cool, thanks, I really appreciate that. I've got two more, thanks, Mayor. What additional safeguards should be put in place for the 2P scheme to ensure that the unacceptable risk to life that exists for the dwelling is sufficiently well addressed by the proposed mitigation solution when the CAT 2P designation is decided? So in other words, someone comes around and says, look, what you really need is a retaining wall. And does it behove the homeowner to say, look, actually, that's not going to help, or that's still not going to minimise the risk? What are we going to do about that?
So I think the key element, Councillor Henderson, in terms of the gateways, the homeowner has an ability to provide general response in terms of what the issues and risks might be, professional response from a technical point of view, but then the feasibility phase allows that from what's practicable, what's feasible, what's affordable, what's consentable. So there are those gateways in there to really test the efficacy or effectiveness of the mitigation proposed and the practicality of it.
Thank you. Last one. So if new information becomes available in the review before 2P, can there be a process to change to a Cat 3? So is there a jump-off point in that left-hand slide there where people can say, look, thanks, but no thanks. We just want to move on with our lives?
The usual jump-off for Cat 3 if it's not feasible and affordable. And there are a number of, the scenarios are there. Certainly, we've got a homeowner's handbook going out very shortly on the Cat 2P, which will, outline those elements. There are obviously, for Category 2P, homeowners or property owners have other options as well if they don't want to live in those locations but implement the program.
Okay.
It is difficult, we acknowledge that, for people who have gone through these significant weather events and are suffering anxiety still.
Oh, 100%.
I totally appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, and reserve my right to speak. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. They were actual questions too. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson's asked some of the issues I had, but I just want to clarify a couple of things, and this slide has been really useful, thank you. So what is the thinking behind doing the categorisation before the scoping is complete? So is there any ability, because I think this is a little bit of a bugbear for some people, they're quite concerned, they're put in 2P, and then they end up at the end of scoping back in 3. When does the clock start ticking on the 2 years? When does the clock start ticking on 3 months? Those kind of aspects. So is it at all possible that we could look at a tentative 2P at categorisation and then confirm the categorisation when we get down to the bottom there, where we've got, after the discussion with the homeowner? Or does that just not work in practice?
Your Worship, thanks, Councillor Ferry. Certainly the early 2P decisions we've made, we're getting some of that feedback of being able to, explore the feasibility. But initial 2P could be used, but there is quite a clear process in place to be able to dispute and those different gateways to really test the efficacy or is it practicable, affordable, is it feasible, and get feedback from homeowners. So I do feel we've got a good process in place for that. Currently we have potential disputes, no formal ones yet, but inquiries for 5 people who have received the Category 1, or homeowners. We've got 3 for Category 3 homeowners and 4 for Category 2P. So it's across the categorisation scheme that we have people seeking reviews. So keeping that consistent, it has a level of equity in it.
So it might be it might be a comms issue then about saying, look, your initial category 2P, we confirm your 2P at the end of the scoping process, but I guess then we have an issue about those clocks that start ticking and which of those is the more appropriate time. I think the point about when new information is discovered as well, and the impact that might have on timing and also cost, how that might be dealt with if we get into that grant phase, but actually we're effectively having to go back to the scoping phase because there's new information or...
Sorry, I didn't answer your question around when the clock starts ticking for deliverability. That's when that final feasibility has been confirmed and the grant for the implementation of the works is issued.
Okay, so it is probably useful to think about initial 2P and then confirmed 2P. I'm not telling you what language to use, I'm just clarifying it for my head. So, so then if we do get into the grant phase and people, start digging or whatever and discover things are not quite as they thought, or perhaps there's another weather event that impacts on the ability to do works or impacts on the ground, how do we go back to scoping for an impacted property? How's that going to work out? I mean, obviously you're going to have a certain amount of flexibility.
I think that's the point, Councillor Ferry, is flexibility and ensuring the works can be delivered. The purpose here, the policy outcome, is to make sure the property can be safely lived in and that intolerable risk to life is removed. So we may have some of those circumstances. Our approach of doing that upfront feasibility for being able to deliver the works to achieve the outcome is why we're investing more upfront than I would hope we would discover those limitations before we got to the scenario you outlined.
Yeah.
It would be quite unusual.
It's extremely difficult to produce a one-size-fits-all policy. That everywhere you look in this stuff, there's nuance. And I expect us to rely heavily upon the sort of the special circumstances category, to be honest, over the coming 6 months in all of this categorisation stuff.
Thank you. I think that's quite reassuring to hear that special circumstances will be used a fair bit, and I hope that we've adequately resourced you because special circumstances will require additional staffing for a start. So what my other question was, so I just want to again clarify this. So in that scoping phase, if the mitigation offered, if the homeowner says, look, we don't think that mitigation's going to work for XYZ reasons, is there an ability for them to dispute the type of mitigation, not the categorisation? So they're saying, look, we still think a 2P is possible here, but we think the solution you've come up with is undercooked, is the most likely outcome, right? Most likely concern. So they have, because I'm pretty sure I heard you say before that they possibly do have a process for that, but I just want to confirm that.
So Councillor Ferry, the proposed mitigation is being done at that property level risk assessment right at the front of the process. So that's when they can either suggest an alternative or challenge what's being proposed.
Okay, and that doesn't automatically trigger. We relook at the categoriser. I mean, obviously it will if the value of the agreed mitigation is above 25%. It will, but it doesn't automatically go, oh, you're asking to be recategorised. It is actually a discussion about the mitigation. Okay, that's really reassuring too. And then my other question is the Crown funding agreement timelines. Just mindful of the central government situation and the fact that we might need some ministerial sign-offs, and sometimes things sit on ministers' desks for a little while at the start of a term as they get themselves sorted. So are we sort of feeling reasonably confident about those things going quickly? That's my final question. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we were reasonably confident about them going quickly, but tomorrow we have a session with Crown Infrastructure Partners, and one of the things on the agenda is we've signed the agreement, but they've yet to send us back a signed copy, so it's high on the agenda tomorrow.
Good luck, thanks.
Thank you for that. Mace, don't be scared of the
Microphone, will you? You're mumbling in the background. And the other part of it, that Julie, is that these things get better. You get better at these as you do them. And so I've instructed them to pick on reasonably sensibly clear ones first, where the mitigation is obvious. It's either a retaining wall or jacking the house up, and wander into the more tricky ones as you get better at it. This is a learning process, and so we will do that as well. This is also a learning process around the town. I'm learning how many people want to ask questions, haven't listened to what we've learned before, but we've got Ken Turn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That bottom of that scoping column is very contentious, and where do you see the people going for, you know, disagreement resolution? You know, how do you see people settling this with a third party? Have we got a process in place? Well, where do they go? Is there, if they don't agree with us and we don't agree with them and we can't come to agreement, who settles that and where do you see that going?
There is a review process that's been approved, Councillor Turner, and then the final agreement is by the Chief Executive with independent expert advice. So
there's no, I do know the Chief Ombudsman talked about in a meeting in the Waitakere Rangers Local Board office about seeing a potential need for a matrix of dispute resolution. You haven't, so my question again is there a third party other than the courts that could be a balance on this?
If I could comment, we've taken that advice into account. We've looked at this very carefully in terms of natural justice, procedural fairness, other examples and what have you. And I'm pretty comfortable that we've got good checks and balances and avenues for people to pursue without causing it to go too quickly to litigation, which will slow a lot of stuff down and be costly both for us and others.
But that's reassuring, thank you.
and just to provide a further assurance, Councillor Jenner, we do have some expert panels looking at both landslide and flooding, so we're ensuring that feasibility, but certainly to reflect the Chief Executive's comment, this is about fairness and equity. It's not a legislated scheme either, it's voluntary. So there are.
Councillor Sayers.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I guess I see the item today primarily around the funding of some of those 2P initiatives, so thank you for that. Also, we're having to invent this as we go, so I appreciate it evolves. And as the Mayor said, we learn as we go and try and improve things. So I think it's been very helpful, the number of the questions that have been asked by my colleagues around the table, and thank you for answering them. So just for my clarity, so I can support the resolution up there, because aligned with this is the ongoing concerns about the ability for property owners to challenge the 2P categorisation process before it is finalised, right? So I think you're helping to answer that, but also I've been in direct contact with the Mayor's office and the Chief Executive over this. So I just would like to ask, or just confirm the current ability for those property owners to challenge the 2P categorisation process, because prior to being finalised, because the council's in such a powerful position to be able to do that. And then, I'll ask that first, see how we go there.
Thank you, Councillor Sayers. So certainly in the categorisation process, that first box is a subject to scoping and dispute resolution. So there's that opportunity for people to challenge that process. And I think, as I said, often we're finding with the settings, they're quite they're finely set in terms of affordability and practicality or feasibility of delivering within the settings of 25% of CV. So,
okay. Well,
but it does rely on getting that information from landowners and entering into the process. But we're taking a very permissive approach at the beginning and taking a learning approach as the Mayor has outlined.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Foley.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, team, for your work on this. You know, as others have said, we are learning as we go and we're making up the process as we go as well. My concern, though, is around even just accessing the process itself. A lot of communities, affected communities in my ward, there'll be certain barriers like language barriers and others that make this a very complicated process for them to even access and enter into. So are you able to talk to what consideration you've given to that, what support might be in place to help people so that they are able to access this process? Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor Foley. Yeah, certainly understand the question and the diversity across Tamaki Makaurau and the people impacted by the severe weather events. With co-funding from central government agencies, we now have 38 navigators, including those from community-based NGO organisations or non-government organisations who are embedded in those communities, know those communities, have language and understand the culture of different communities. So I feel really confident that the support is there for communities and homeowners, residents as well. And I think in your community recently, I think you were at one of those recent drop-in sessions, so I'm really encouraged by that in terms of people's accessibility. But we acknowledge that the capability of people through the impacts of the storms or other barriers that may exist, such as language, is an important issue for us to attend to. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Yes, and the navigators that I met anyway were awesome, so thanks for that. Kia ora, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. Councillor Hills.
Good, thank you, Mayor. First of all, some just high-level questions on the process because I'm getting a lot more feedback of distressed people, and I know I ask this every time, but could you let us know, A, the sorts of numbers you're working with, and B, the sort of wait times? I know there's been things like 6 weeks, 10 weeks post visits, but understandingly, when you're working with thousands, could you give us an idea of how long the process is taking, because people are growingly upset, of course.
Thank you, Councillor Hills. In terms of the process, we are making good progress, as Chief Executive outlined in the memo circulated to councillors under separate cover in terms of how we're moving through that. So we initially have gone out to just on 3,500 homeowners, 2,200 have opted into that categorisation process. We've completed 1,390 desktop assessments, just over 900 site visits for risk, property level risk-based analysis. Our pipe, we've now completed just over 220 categorisation decisions out to homeowners, and I just outlined some of the disputes we're seeing coming through. But our timeline in a careful way to get those decisions right does take us through to March, the 1st of March. But we realise that people are waiting and decisions are critical, so we're moving as fast as we can. But in addition to Councillor Henderson's question, we will be able to give an indication of that spatial approach, and certainly we are focusing on people who are displaced from their homes as being the most important.
Thank you. Just on, I know we have heard a lot of advocacy from certain stickered groups, often because they're collected in very close proximity to each other. The North Shore Stickered Group has residents from quite a sparse area of little pockets. Have you had much contact directly with the North Shore Stickered Group, and are they getting escalated to the same as, obviously timing wise, but?
I think it's a key message, Councillor Hills, is that we are taking an equitable approach across the region. I've personally gone to, been in Sunnynock, Totara Vale, and also in Milford, and had meetings in the Wairau Valley with stickered groups, and now I know that our community navigators are having direct contact and direct with stickered groups and individual residents across your ward and other wards as well.
Thank you. On the 2P, I know we've already made the decisions based on, the funding we had to get from government and figure out how we're going to get from ratepayers at some point. But the is there flexibility in there for things that don't fit a clear example? A lot of our process sounds like it's, a house, standalone house. There is examples of homes that are attached to other homes. One might be a red, one might be a yellow, one might be fine, one might be not. The cost will outweigh anything, of the 25% because of the nature of the build. Are we looking at those sorts of ability? I know there's flexibility for people who are in hardship, but are there flexibility in the type of process under this as well?
Thanks, Councillor. I think it's dangerous to think of what we're describing here in terms of the building sticker process, red versus yellow. Two buildings that are attached to each other are obviously a special case regardless of whether one's red sticker or yellow sticker. And this is all moving beyond red and yellow stickers now, and the categorisation process kind of doesn't really take account at all of red versus yellow. The situation you're describing, there's obviously a big interlink, both physically and practically, between those two buildings, right?
I guess maybe I should have said a 3 versus a 2P then attached to each other. Is there special circumstances to move that 25% around if things don't quite match up case by case?
Definitely.
Thank you. I remind everybody, it went through a pretty severe political working group, so it has been reviewed a lot. And of course, if you think hard enough, you'll think of some weird case that no one's thought of, but still, let's have a go there, Councillor Watt.
The question I've got just goes to efficiency and reducing costs. If we accept that geographically you're going to have a location where you've got a number of houses and they may be subject to the same geotech conditions, they may be subject to an overland flow path that runs through a number of the properties that they've got in common. And I could go on. There may be similar things that need to be done in respect of lifting the homes and the like. So my question is it conceivable that there's some facility that can be put in place so that information can be shared? Because otherwise, there's going to be a lot of repetition, and consultants and people involved here are going to be making a lot of money. We're interested in ensuring that things are as cost effective as possible. Obviously, we're interested in dealing with people, consultants and the like, that have got the right experience. So when I look at this process, it strikes me that there are some mechanisms that could be put in place to make it more efficient. There'll be some instances where you'll be able to look at a place and make a rough order decision that, it's just not feasible. So how do we accommodate that in this process?
Thanks, Councillor. Where it's appropriate to aggregate work and use the economies of scale to not be repeating lessons learned again and again and again, we're doing so. So an example would be house demolition. We expect to have around about 700 homes that are going to need to be demolished. That's of considerable scale in anybody's world. And that is something that we're using a small panel for, who will deal with all of the homes for us rather than going home by home by home. So where we can, we are aggregating and trying to use the economies of scale.
And just further to that, given that the council's got considerations around sustainability, there's a lot of embedded carbon in these properties. I think, the mayor and other people around here have made comments on what happened in Christchurch, which was disastrous in terms of the loss of a lot of materials. Are we applying any of those concepts and concerns to what's happening here?
Most definitely. There's some really good examples already in the Auckland context. Kaingaora lead the way in Auckland in terms of house removal rather than house demolition, which we intend to use a lot of those learnings. Deconstruction, there's some great examples on how you can apply deconstruction at this scale to hundreds and hundreds of homes that we intend to leverage off as well. Again, some really good Kāinga Ora initiatives. We've got no desire to reinvent the wheel. Wherever we can use good stuff that's been done previously, we will.
Okay, and the last question that I've just raised before is the concern around precedent here, because these sorts of instances of events, they're going to happen again. And the particular concern that I've got is in cases where you've got what I'd call old style construction, piles and the like, you can lift something. In the areas that are going in place now in flood zones, where they're building the houses, you know, on concrete plates, they're just not going to be recoverable. There are also lessons learned around whether homeowners have insured or not. So my real concern is that we're putting in place a parallel piece of work that's anticipating the future events that we're going to have to make sure that we're safeguarded, because we literally can't afford replicating this. And I'd just like to have some assurance that that work's happening. Thanks.
So I think, Your Worship, and Councillor Walker, thanks for the question. You may recall on the for the Category 3 decision you made in early October, Your Worship, you wrote to the government as part of the funding scheme to investigate a national scheme to be able to respond to these type of events, and that there has been a select committee work program identified for looking at the severe weather events and what the learnings are around that, and I expect there'll be participation in that. I'd also, Councillor Hill's committee is looking at a number of regional policy or work program, which is really addressing this at a regional level and inputting at a national level as well. So I think
it's all a matter of building up experience. We'll be having teams of retaining wall builders, because a lot of them will be retaining walls. We'll have teams of house lifters, because there will be a lot of them will be house lifters. We'll have teams of demolishers, as Matt has said. Not as quick as my early efforts into demolition, but we won't go there. Councillor Filipina, good to hear from you out there in the south.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Mayor, and tēnā korua, Maestro ko Matt, and good to see you as well, Mr. Mayor. Look, I've got very short questions. Mace, the list that you referred to with Councillor Henderson, is that list, and first, can you please send that to me as well? But is that list, will that list give us properties that still haven't been assessed and categorised at Category 3 and 2P?
It'll provide the priorities, Councillor Filipina, and what's been progressed to date. But there are also those priority communities around Category 2C, and particularly in your ward, there's a number of projects in Te Rata Stream and Hania Stream in that location as well.
And just supplementary to that, I know there are some properties in my ward, and I've been contacted by some of the owners. They've been assessed as of early November, but then they'll have to wait a few more months to be categorised. So is that, are there many, not only in my ward, but across Tāmaki, in the same situation, going back to the January floods and cyclone?
There are, Councillor Filipina. We expect categorisation to continue right till the first week of March, and about 30 to 40 to 50 properties each week to get through that list and number. And then
yeah, sorry, Mace. Can I just humbly suggest that that information needs to be put out to the community so they understand? Another paita, and sorry, Mr. Mayor, in regards to the navigators, what training will be made available to them in regards to the information that we're discussing, but also around Category 3, because as you know, they are going to be the link with our community. So what training and assistance will they and resourcing will they get in the following months?
Thank you, Member Filipina. The training really is around psychosocial support, but also being a key connector into other agencies such as Te Whatu Ora. We've had a lot of confidence from Crown agencies such as MSD at putting funding into the Recovery Office and the Community and Social Recovery. Te Whatu Ora is currently also providing funding that will provide direct assistance to people who find themselves severely affected from a psychosocial point of view, but a broad range of training. And a selection of those people with those skills has been undertaken.
Councillor, just to add to what Mesa said, the navigators don't know everything about everything. That wouldn't be practical. But what the navigators know is where to find the answers to all of the questions and who to connect people to. But they themselves don't know the answers to everything.
Totally agree, Matt. So I look forward to the job description. Just to help with that, Mr. Mayor, this is the last question, and it's really clarification from my perspective based on apartheid from Councillor Henderson, well, everybody really, and it's around just getting in my head. I've been contacted by, as the other councillors, with a lot of the groups that are around Tamaki Makaurau. So can you just reconfirm that before there is any money spent from the homeowners, that the resolution of any disputes will be sorted before there is any money, whether it be the grants or whether it be any of the homeowners, before they spend that will be done under the categorization chart that we see in front of us. So, Mace, can you just confirm that before anything gets done, that before the homeowners especially end up spending money, that dispute will happen and then hopefully resolved? If not, they go into the Category 3. Can I just confirm that that happens, please?
Councillor Filipina, within our control, yes, that's right. That's the intention, and things within our control.
Kia ora. Mr. Mayor, I just reserve my right to kōrero as well. Whakaaro. Kia ora.
Oh, thank you, Alf. At least those were questions. Two more questions, one from Councillor Fletcher and one from Councillor Stewart.
Largely my questions have been answered already, but in terms of this being a public meeting, I just want to ask, I suppose it's Phil, when you get to the final stage of lifting the limb notice, a number of people have asked me whether the information will remain on the property file that people can apply and pay for.
I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I think anything that Mace says we should preface with we have certain responsibilities that will mean the potential for advice remaining on limbs unless the hazard is entirely gone.
But a property file is more fulsome than a limb. And currently we have a situation where people can apply and I think pay $30 or something for a property file. Mace, can you tell me what is anticipated of what will then remain on the property file?
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. So we do have an obligation we'll put that information on the property file, but what it will clearly show where there's been a resolution to a hazard or a problem with the building, that will be also clearly stated to give people confidence.
That's helpful, and that was what I expected, but it's just because there's been public interest in this.
Good question, good answer. Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. Most of the questions have actually been answered. But would you find it probably a bit more helpful if councillors actually sent you some of these questions prior to a meeting, so you can actually have it in writing for us, because it will be for public record, and because all these questions have been really, really good, but it would be I'm just going back to how Sir Barry would have done it. You know, just get the questions and then it's out there for the public to read as well, because it will be public record. Thank you. Excuse my voice.
Yeah, thank you, councillor. I mean, I wouldn't like to make that decision, but if that's something you want to agree as a group that would be useful for you, certainly we can accommodate that. That wouldn't be my decision to make.
There's nothing stopping councillors sending in questions to you whenever they like, and they'll be answered. And there will be kept record of what we've said here anyhow, so I think that's very good. I'll try and emulate Sir what's his name and do a better job. We've now got to the point where I will move this and the Deputy Mayor will second this as a comprehensive recommendation in full A to E. I will allow you to go back there, and there is a little bit of debate to come. Councillor Philippina and then Councillor Henderson, but let's make it a debate. Councillor Philippina, you did reserve your right, and I'm going to give it back to you now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it'll be very short like the pathways that I've asked. I just want to acknowledge, firstly, the team, but more importantly, the navigators, even though they have a role, that role that they have actually complements what we've just heard. So I just want to make sure that they're resourced. The other issue that I just want to have a very small comment on is Councillor Ferry mentioned resourcing for Matt's team, Mason and the rest, and I think that's so important as well. After hearing that, you know, we're still looking at March. I know of one, maybe 3 addresses just in one street that is waiting to get categorised. Obviously, they need to wait until those that are in a worse position, but they haven't actually moved back into their home. They wish to, but they can't as a result of what happened in January. So I just wanted to acknowledge the staff and also the navigators. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It's a very good point. I can understand why people are frustrated, but the market didn't gear up for this work. It didn't know it was coming, and so we found that we had the number of geotech engineers available for what's normal service, and suddenly there's not normal service. I contemplated tossing in the mayor's salary and going, I need some real money because I know how to do that. Councillor Henderson, please, and Councillor.
Thank you. I'll be as brief as I can, but I've got some points to cover, so I'll just try and be brief. But you look, first and foremost, acknowledging, you know, there's a lot of people online watching us today, actually, that have been affected by floods in the past, and they've contacted me, and I really thank them for contacting me, and just shout out for all those people, you know, sharing concerns, sharing stories. It must be bloody hard to go through this all the time, so just acknowledging that. I would say, my phone's going off, I hope that might be one of them. But, you know, I would encourage everyone here to kind of reflect on this is actually a really important thing we're doing right now, and kind of to reflect on the gravity of that we as city leaders need to collaborate and work together on this stuff where people are still out of their homes and doing it bloody tough. So, yeah, thank you for that. And just acknowledging as well the group that worked on this, and, you know, went through many, many hours trying to negotiate and then getting us to this point. So thank you for that as well. It is hard because we are, in some sense, sort of designing the plane as we're flying it. But people, I think, are really justified in contacting us and saying, look, you've got to move as quickly as you can. You've got to do it as simply as you can, with as little in the way of barriers as you can. And I know that's something that I have always advocated for, and I know a number of others as well have done that, because we've got to get funds in people's bank accounts, right? And try and get them done as quick as we can. That'd be what I encourage staff working on this to do. And, you know, some of the feedback that I've received that I completely agree with is that there needs to be a path out of 2P, right? And that's it, you know, various trigger points, because people do need to have their own agency. Everyone's got different circumstances, and they know their situation, they know their community in many cases, they know that hill behind them actually will come down, right? So they need to be able to opt out and say, look, I will actually just take 3 and move on. I think giving people that agency is really important. I don't want us as well to kind of look at the dispute resolution process as the backstop there, right? Because that can be time consuming, that can be really bruising for people and tough, you know, when people, they've already said they want to move on and that they'd have to go through a process that could take a lot longer. Because, you know, people are different. And the other thing I'll just say is that, you know, this is really good news. You know, at the start of all of this, 2P was barely thought of and it certainly wasn't funded, right? So we've had to work very hard behind the scenes, acknowledge people like the Deputy Mayor, acknowledge Councillor Ferry, Councillor Hills and yourself, the Mayor as well, for working on all of this. We had situations where people were being initially asked to shell up for things like resource consents. And without a process of fast tracking that, we had to work on all of that behind the scenes. So I really want to just say that I really appreciate that and our community really appreciates all of your hard work. I just encourage staff to continue to collaborate with the stickered residents groups across the city, because there's been some really, I think, legitimate and understandable concerns that isn't to dampen the good news, right? It's to sort of work on how we're going to make this work for us and for our communities. So keep working, keep collaborating, make yourself available to questions and concerns like you have so far. And finally, I just hope that I've represented some of those concerns and some of those positive things as faithfully as I can today. Thank you, Mayor.
And you definitely have. Thank you very much for that. You've summed that up. This is a clever addition to a generous solution. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. A bit hard coming after Shane there, but I would just like to add, I really agree with the points that he made, and I know that this has been and continues to be an incredibly stressful situation for people who are caught up in it. And I really appreciate the way that Matt and Mace took us through the details today and answered our questions so that we could get some clarity and reassurance for those who are caught up in it. I think the responses have been really comprehensive and showed compassion and flexibility, which I think is what we're looking for here. I was particularly glad to hear about the work that's happening with the panels around the contractors and stuff, and learning from Kāinga Ora's expertise on deconstruction and stuff, which has become quite significant in my community. I would like to also mention that the navigators on the ground, I'm getting really good feedback about, and I think part of the reason for that is because they're being recruited from the communities they're serving. Which I think is a really wise idea. It's Community Development 101. Go to where people are, work with the leaders who are already there. And I also want to acknowledge that we're just sort of starting the journey with the community connectors who will be able to work with the resident groups that are forming and have come together, with the grant scheme for that just going live recently. And I think that that's going to be a really useful addition to this that will help people who are in these 2P, 3, 2C and seeking 1, but also the broader community who are worried, you know, knowing that we have 50,000 properties in a floodplain, and most of those actually didn't get hit in these events. So a lot of people are worried and looking for support for what's next. Just in closing, I'd like to suggest, as I said, I thought this was a really useful discussion, and I do wonder if it's fodder for another webinar that could, I'm not actually joking, I know it's slightly humorous. We've got a pretty low bar for humour around this table, so I'll allow that. Yeah, thanks. But I do really think that actually a webinar where, you know, in the evening where people who otherwise would be perhaps unavailable to listen in today, that actually goes through some of the details that you shared with us today about, yep, we're going to use the special circumstances for this. Yes, we're thinking about, you know, the timeframes for that. I think that would be very helpful and reassuring for people. And I know the last webinar was really useful and well attended, so I'll just put a punt in there for that as a final comment. Thank you very much.
Councillor Lee.
I just want to support the idea that as many of these buildings be recycled, be for removal, if that can be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, I've made the point that there is probably a secondary market out there that we should encourage. There will be people, even if there are people there whose home might qualify for 2P but don't want to do it, they might sell out, and afterwards there will be people.
And that
who
would
might
be
buy
asset recycling, Mr Mayor.
Eh?
That would be asset recycling.
Yeah, that is asset recycling. But there are people, there are players out there that there is an opportunity. I don't want it to happen like in Christchurch where they just buried everything at maximum waste and minimum opportunity. Well, it's possibly true, but then again, I'm not that stupid. I think we just about got to the stage. You know,
Just to take that further, there was a house in Hakanoa Street, Grey Lynn, that was flooded up to the door lintel, and so I thought, wow, this is an exceptional 1,000-year type flood, but it was a house for removal. It's an old Kauri Edwardian house. It could be moved again and recited, so thank you.
Oh, I'm right with you on that one. This is, well, I've already mentioned today we need to learn from our experience and we need to teach others, but also there is experiences before. The Kaios and things that have been flooding for years have now learned how to do that. So we can look at other places to learn. We keep learning. I think Matt and his team have had severe bashing from me that they've got to keep learning and getting better. Okay, all those in favour of the comprehensive recommendation on page 7, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, carried. Thank you. It was an excellent discussion. I'm going to plough on a bit here. We haven't had a break yet, and I've been told I'm breaking some policies in doing so, but I'm going to try and get